Welcome to the sixth episode of The New Normal by Newsfirst. In today's episode, we'll be exploring agriculture and related industries. COVID-19 has highlighted a number of systemic weaknesses, and we're fortunate enough to be able to raise those weaknesses, study them. Rather than patch them up, I think we need to understand what caused them in the first place, fix them at the root, and prevent them from occurring again. If you look at the recent past, our value system has changed dramatically. I think although we all know it, and we were spiraling so far and fast out of control that even if we stopped to think about it, we would be left behind. Celebrities earning millions for entertaining the world, and farmers struggling for survival while feeding the world. Universally, this seems inequitable. The produce from the farmer once processed by industries, in some cases, is almost unrecognizable to the human body in terms of nutrition. Today, I think we know where we are and how we've got here. But I think in order to know where we must go, we have to first know where we came from. To explore this vast subject and to find some answers, I'm joined by Bandula Pereira, COO and Group General Manager for Malibon Biscuits, Bhatia Bulumulla, Director and Chief Executive Officer for Elpitia Plantations PLC, and Dr. Shanti Wilson, Independent Consultant on Sustainable Fresh Produce Supply Chains and former Head of Food and Technology, Additional Director of Research and Development at ITI. I'm also joined by Chandrajayaratna, Rapporteur. While working to feed the world, many agricultural workers are unable to lift themselves out of poverty and food insecurity. My first question to Bhatia is, how long after curfew or after the lockdown was imposed, was it before the agriculture sector was able to start working again? Bhatia?
Hi, thank you, Niro. I think agriculture sector is one of the sectors that started soon after the COVID-19 lockdown. We actually closed down the estate only for 4 or 5 days. Soon after the lockdown, and we got permission from the authorities, from the Ministry of Plantations, to work, because that's the bloodline of Sri Lanka, I presume. And we managed to get all our workers to come to work and work during this difficult period, looking into their all health aspects. We educated them on this COVID-19, and also, we gave them all the facilities to prevent this COVID-19 getting spread around. And I'm glad to say we didn't have a single case coming from any of the plantation sector. So basically, within 4 to 5 days, we start working, and even the authorities helped us to cross borders and to send our produce as raw materials. And we were, being able to look after our workers. That's another important thing that I had to tell you. We managed to look after all our workforce. We didn't allow them to go out of the plantation. We supplied them their food rations. I think only industry, gave them the food ration to them to live during that period, and we delivered them there up to their doorstep. And I think, we managed to come back very fast without affecting the industry very much.
Thank you, Bhatia. Bandula, what about, what have you found? Bhatia said that the farmers are able to work the land and the agri-processors are working. What about in your industry? Is everyone back at work, and how soon after the lockdown were they able to get back to work?
Biscuit industry concern, biscuit and the milk industry concern, of course, we had to close down for a week, and after that, we could start the operations. But in our agri sector, we didn't stop for a single day, because we could work, because our agri sector is in Anuradhapura, Polonnaruwa and Monradal areas. There, of course, we got the support from the government and as well as the police. So we didn't stop our work, and we basically work throughout the curfew period. And as Bhatia explained, we also had precautions and, checking their fever and various kind of thing and get doctors to the site and check the people who are having kind of a cough or whatever it is. And we manage the situation. Fortunately, there is no any COVID related patients or suspected people from our company or the group. So we manage it very well in terms of getting the work and in terms of their health.
Thank you, Bandula. Dr. Wilson, could you describe the agriculture supply chain for us? How many steps are there between the farmer and the consumer?
Yes, Niru. In Sri Lanka, for the most part, the supply chain is rather complex and long. So you start off with the farmer on the one hand, then you have a collection agent or a transport agent who takes it the next step, and there may be one or more intermediaries, and then you have the wholesaler and the wholesale market, from where you go to the retailer, and then finally the consumer. But there are many complexities within that sort of circle. And the shorter the supply chain, that's what we want, because the leaks are less and the produce gets to the consumer faster. So that's the target. But at present, for the most part, the chain is quite long, supply chain.
And could you tell us, at which points throughout the supply chain do you think we face the biggest challenges during this pandemic? Sorry, you're...
Okay. What happened was the logistics. The farmers had produce, but they couldn't very well get it across because of the curfew and restrictions. But on a normal basis, I would say that if you look at the supply chain as a whole, the production base itself is rather weak, and we can discuss that later. But my answer to you with regard to the pandemic is that maybe the distribution broke, the distribution line didn't function, and that caused huge problems.
Okay, and the distribution chain or the supply chain, that may have been exacerbated, due to the pandemic. But are there systemic issues within that supply chain which need to be addressed even before, COVID-19?
Yes, there are several. I'll just summarize some of the issues. One is that the farmer base is very weak. The majority of our produce is produced by small farmers. So the economies of scale come into play, and we find that these farmers are very vulnerable because they are farming small plots of land, and their overheads are high, and then they don't have the means of marketing, and they're very dependent on what is available for as far as seed material goes. And so what we should really target is organized production, where you have a market-oriented production base. And there are several models that can be adopted, and some of them are already in place, and we're very happy to see that happening. You have large farmers, but obviously that won't apply to everyone. You do need to have collective farming, and how we do that is the question. So you can have models where you have a nucleus farm with the nucleus farm working with groups of farmers. You can have hired contract farming, like what some of the supermarkets are doing right now. Or you can have cooperatives. And I don't mean the cooperatives that exist today. At one time, way back, maybe in the 40s, 50s, 60s, the cooperatives I felt function better, where the farmers were directly involved in looking after their produce and marketing it, and working together. Today, that cooperative system has become politicized, and it's more a means of lobbying for various things like cheaper fertilizers, subsidies, that kind of thing. That is not what I mean by collective farming cooperatives. what I would like to see is farmers getting together, maybe setting up business units for themselves, 2 or 3 farmers working together, then their land mass increases, so the economy of scale comes is viable. They can share their resources, they can go to banks, negotiate loans, because our agribusiness banking systems are also very weak because the farmers have so little collateral to go on. So the production base is a very vulnerable one. That's one item. And then we have uh, lots of intermediaries and our logistics. Now, in the past, the Manning market was the major wholesale market in the country, and about 80% of the produce from all over the island came to Manning market. Of course, this couldn't carry on because it's such a small place and crowded and so on. So the government then set up this other market in Dambulla, which originally was meant to be a farmer's market. But today, about 70% of all the produce goes into Dambulla and out again. So what I think is necessary is that we need more wholesale markets, a network of wholesale markets. Say, for instance, in Kilinochchi or Vavuniya for the north and north central provinces, then Putlam or Chilau, Putlam would be fine, I would think, because the road networks are good, for another wholesale market. And we have Dambulla already, so something in the south, perhaps Matara or Gaul, Hambantota. I would suggest Matara because we have the highway and everything. And this would mean that there would be competition between markets, and also the distances traveled by produce would be less. So you can then start introducing good packaging material. We all know that using crates, plastic crates would, or any kind of container to protect the produce is important, and that could then be introduced and made economically viable. At the moment, people would prefer to use the plastic crates as storage items for their homes. The farmers, they can't afford them, they're so expensive. They're being used by exporters and the supermarkets and some retailers, but we would like to see a lot more care taken of the produce. At the moment, they are sent in these jute bags or poly bags, and they're used, the containers are used as units of sale rather than their primary objective. Packaging is meant to protect whatever is inside, and that's not happening. So that's another leak.
Dr. Wilson, thank you very much for those valuable suggestions. I'd like to turn my attention to Bandul Pereira. Could you tell us, could you elaborate on some of the points that Dr. Wilson has already raised in terms of meeting some of the challenges and suggesting some remedies for the challenges faced in that supply chain?
Yeah. And this supply chain issue, because of the COVID, yes, we had certain issues because of the curfew situation. Other than that, they had their own issues before under normal circumstances. Also, they had their own issues. I would say, for an example, farmer to transport their whatever harvest to Dambulla. So it takes, from Dambulla, some farmer bases take more than 1.5 hours, 2 hours for them to come to Dambulla. Then what happens is intermediary, they interfere. So they go to the farmer bases and they buy at a cheaper prices. So then they transport this to Dambulla economic center. And also the crop cultivated is mainly, it's not based on the demand. It's not based on the demand. As a result, during the cropping months, they got a lot of trouble. For an example, tomato. Tomato in this area, what you call the Thanamalil area. So during the season, they get huge quantities. They cultivate without proper planning. So then the country demand, for an example, country demand for tomato is 150,000 metric tons per annum. So that's a rough figure. So certain years, For 3 months' time, they cultivate 200 metric tons. The harvest is 250 metric tons, 200 metric tons of tomatoes. Then there is no mechanism to preserve these things for value-added product or export or whatever it is. Therefore, this wastages not mainly because of the transportation. As doctor very correctly said, the farmer doesn't want to go for this plastic trays because that is expensive. But no one, there is no one to educate these farmers. Now see, when they get up 100 kilos from their plot, from 1 acre, so they just put into a polysack or the gunny bag. They just transport it to Dambul. The wastage percentage is more than 20%. So the price they get is very minimum price. If they use the plastic trays, and if we can have a mechanism to avoid this intermediate. Now, for an example, in Sri Lanka, about 1,000 odd supermarkets are there, B2B supermarkets. B2C, you have another 1,000 odd supermarkets. Now, this B2B supermarkets, some of the supermarkets, they have their own mechanism to get the vegetable and fruit from the farmer bases. So they go to where they grow and they collect the vegetable and the fruits. So I don't want to mention the name of the supermarkets, but if you go to some of the supermarkets, you get the fresh vegetable, fresh fruits. The reason is they go to the farmer base, they have a mechanism, very clear mechanism, and a systematic mechanism. So they go to the farmer base and then collect it and it comes to their central warehouse. From central warehouse, what they do is they distribute to their supermarkets. Likewise, now what happens is the vegetable and the fruits comes to the economic centers. So again, they unload, they are loading these things at the farmer point and unloading at Dambulla. Again, they are loading to the lorries and coming to the Colombo Mani Market or whatever. So see the damage. Huge quantities are, going as a wastage. And if we can have a mechanism, government and the private sector should intervene in this manner, especially the private sector. Private sector can, give a lot of value addition to this process. Now, for an example, if you are cultivating tomato, our requirement 150,000 metric tons. We can have a zone in Thanamanlila, that area, Vellavai, that area, okay, that is tomato cultivation zone. And have a kind of a factory, private sector can set up a factory, and whatever produce, we know national requirement, it is 150,000 metric tons. So excess we can use for value-added products. So we can make, pulp out of tomato and sauce kind of thing. Now, for an example, so we Maliban as a group, we do cultivate mango. That is in Monragala. Monragala, when we go to the Monragala, the challenge was the water. Out of 12 months, 8 months we don't get the water. In Sri Lanka, according to the irrigation department, there are over, I would say, over 30,000 small and medium, small and large tanks. Out of 30, I don't know whether 10,000 are basically operating. So in Monragala itself, you have only 30 to 35 tanks, but that's all rain-filled. No any other way to get the water. When we go to the Monragala, because I just want to encourage the private sector and I just want to give a message to the government as well. When we go to the Monragala, so the challenge was water, nothing else, because labor is available. Where our state is in Simbalandu, the poorest AGS division. So when we go there, you see 8 months we don't have water. We also had a bit of a kind of a challenge, and we thought, of course, no point of going and cultivating, because if you don't have water, how to grow the plants. But we got some technical people and found water inside the estate. We did only 3 agricultural wells, spending about 450,000. We did 2 lakes, 2 lakes, and now we have enough and more water for our 100 acres of land. And we are going to get some other farmers, outgrowers to cultivate for us. Probably next year we are going to set up a factory for the pulp and value-added products. So there are ways and means. Only what you need is the commitment. Coming back to the supply chain, it's not that difficult. Only thing we have to get what some of the supermarkets chains are doing, get some private sector involved, or the government, as doctor said, the corporate. I mean not the corporate that we have, some kind of refined, committed, the people who understand farmers' grievances. We have to have a kind of a mechanism. So then easily we can, have a system to transport their goods. Because what happened today? Where a farmer produce, will say tomato, he sells at, will say 15 rupees per kilo. When it's reached to a Colombo, the 50 rupees, we have to spend 50 rupees to get 250 grams. That is the situation. Huge gap. But farmer is not getting any benefit. Intermediary, of course, getting some benefit. But still, waste, because of the wastages and various kind of other issues, so end user has to pay huge money. At least that if that money goes to a farmer, something, it's not happening. Therefore, we propose authorities to get the private sector and all these agrarian services department people and whatever other people involved, and set up a proper supply chain system for these farmers.
Thank you, Bandula. I'm going to ask Bhath here. Farmers are, both the panelists have described the plight of the farmers and the supply chain. Farmers are in despair because they can't sell. Consumers are in despair because they don't have access to food. And Bandula mentioned a wastage of about 20%. Dr. Shanti and Bandula have both made some very valuable suggestions to reduce the post-harvest losses. Do you have any suggestions to reduce the post-harvest losses and ensure that the food that's actually being grown by the farmers is able to reach the consumers? Prathir.
It's like this now. Actually, in Sri Lanka, we are not short of food or vegetables. It's that we don't manage our crop properly. That's the main problem, I think, as Dr. Shanti said. We have over 15 to 20% of post-harvest wastage. If the authorities, with the help of the private sector who is like to invest in this, if you can find some mechanism or the cold storage, if I give an example, now we grow in our upcountry estates area the potatoes, and during the potato harvest time, the people can't sell their produce because it comes to a very low level of selling price, and they are unable to dispose their crops. And when it comes to the dry season, we are short of potatoes, and you bring it from outside. If you can have that mechanism of cold storage like in the other countries, you preserve this, or give encouragement to the private sector also to go into these storage facilities, and preserve whatever the produce that we produce in Sri Lanka. I think we can manage in a better way, and we will have a surplus. It's good that even right now the government under a program called Saubhagya, I requested even the plantation sector to go forward and start cultivating various fruit and vegetables, because they suspect or they expect a food shortage in time to come. It will happen globally because of this COVID-19. Planting, anyone can do it. If you have the land, if you have the little technology, even our home gardens, we do planting. But what are we going to do once the crops start coming in? What is the mechanism that we have to take all these crops and distribute properly among everyone who deserve to to receive this and to gain some foreign exchange to the country. So that mechanism has to be worked out quickly by the authorities. I would say the agricultural department, they have fantastic qualified people to do this. So people should in those positions should get activated and take initiative. Get private sector. I know government can't do everything. Get private sector, give them facilities, give them encouragement to go into this type of things, and encourage storage when you have a dry spell. I think that's one way forward in this whole exercise.
Okay, thank you, Bhatia. Dr. Shanti, Bhatia mentioned cold storage. I'm aware that your specific expertise is in post-harvest technologies. And cold chain is something that's being looked at very closely right now by the government, by the private sector, and perhaps by the consumers. Given that the majority of the produce is sold in essentially open markets, how relevant is cold chain going to be in improving the post-harvest yield and ensuring that the consumer actually has a protected produce?
Yes, Niro, it is a very interesting and serious issue. Before we go on to cold chains per se, I'd just like to make a few comments regarding the feast, famine, and glut situations that we face. As I said earlier, and we've been discussing, I think Bandula also mentioned that our production is not market-oriented. So the farmers don't have a clear understanding of to whom they really want to sell their produce. So we need that sorted out as well, so that then they can target their produce. Not all the produce that is on the market is ready to go into cold storage. As you very well know, refrigeration is very costly, and only the best quality produce is always channeled, should always be channeled, shall I say, into refrigeration. Because if you put rubbish in, you get double rubbish out. You'll have to throw it away, right? So you can't harvest something and expect that's sort of really not the best quality, it's already diseased or damaged, put it into cold storage and think that you're going to get a good product and be able to sell it. So only the best. So this is why we have to adopt policies that will produce good quality products that can be used and that is safe for the people. And that's why I am really very happy to see the department has taken up the policy of promoting good agricultural practice, GAP. Now this is costly and it's difficult for the farmers to adapt to this system of certified good quality produce. But the government has also taken the initiative to help them achieve this. So investment in GAP as a national policy is a very good one, and it must be done because it will be to the advantage of both the consumer as well as to the farmer. Because at the moment, we all know that we are rather worried about how much chemical is going into a product. Consumer is very concerned about that. And so farmers, on the other hand, think because of lack of knowledge and education, they feel that the more chemical they put in, they get a better product. And they know it's not very good, but they're desperate. So if everybody conforms and if GAP is the protocol for the country, then we have something going for us because it's good for everybody. So it's an investment that we must make. So going on from there, we also have to remember that we are a tropical country, our temperatures are very high, and the products that we use, that we grow, are conditioned for tropical climates. So the maximum storage that you can get of, say, a brinjal, lady's finger, drumsticks, a lot of the low country vegetables, which are grown in tropical climates, have a storage life at the best of about 3 weeks, even under refrigeration. Okay, so we can't think that installing a cold storage facility, huge one in Damulla, is going to serve any real purpose as far as those vegetables go. Okay, upcountry vegetables are temperate, semi-temperate crops, and so things like potatoes, cabbage, can, up to a point, carrots can be stored under low temperature, but they have to go through the protocol of the cold chain, which means they have to be graded, sorted, brought into the temperature that is best suited for each crop. Each crop has a different storage temperature. Most tropical crops like mangoes have to be stored at about 13 degrees centigrade. Potatoes, onions, in other countries, cabbages, carrots are around 4 degrees centigrade. So you can't, you have to have different chambers. Now, as far as onions go, now I was told that the Indian government-funded cold chain facility might be used for storage of onions. And I think that would be a disaster, because the onions we grow and the onions we import are also from countries that produce tropical varieties of onion, right? For instance, the little red onion is no good for storage at all, because it has a dormancy. Its dormancy is very minimal. The moment there is water and humidity, it will sprout. Now, the onion that we call the Bombay onion or the large onion has some storage potential, and it can be stored at ambient temperature, provided it's stored with good ventilation and in a good, well looked after storage facility. We have seen in the North Central province under the Mahaveli some years ago, there was a scheme whereby farmers were allowed to build rustic stores. We helped with the design of this, and the Mahaveli authority also brought down some Indian experts, and they built rustic stores. So they subsidized the building of these stores, and it cost them, say, 50 to 20,000 rupees within one season. After storage for 3 months, they covered the cost. So these rustic stores are very good, and provided they're done properly, under good agricultural practice, they will work. So when we talk about refrigeration, all over the world, refrigeration cold chains are seen to be a source of reducing loss, extending storage life. But what we have to remember is that we grow tropical products which have a limited biological capability of shelf life, right? And so we can use artificial methods or new technology. Let's say new technology. Artificial frightens everybody. But there is very good, safe technology that can be used to prolong seasons, this glut famine sort of season. So for one thing, you can use pruning of crops, which is done so that you stagger production, right? And another simple tool is that you have something. Now we developed at the ITI something called the tree fresh spray, where you can keep the fruit on the tree, mangoes for instance, for 4 to 6 weeks. So that means you have a longer season, and this can be applied to limes and rambutan. We need to do a little bit more work on that. The technology is available. It has been transferred to Haley's, but unfortunately, they have not put it on the market. And I'm very disappointed and disheartened as a researcher and a scientist who put a lot of 4 years work into it to see that it has not reached the consumer. So these things have to be understood. And so there is the possibility of staggering production, and also to make sure that you grow produce in different parts of the country, right? If, for instance, the upcountry vegetables are best grown at a particular season in the upcountry areas, but you can grow some of them in the north, like in Jaffna, for instance, you can grow carrots and cabbage during the northwest monsoon. So if you stagger production and plan it, right, then, and the farmer has that information, we can see that this sort of famine feast issues can be addressed. But it involves planning, responsibility, somebody belling the cat to say who's going to do it. And I feel that the Department of Agriculture is the best facility for this, because they have all the tools, but unfortunately they are not given the adequate recognition and the support they need. And I'm sorry to say that very often when I talk to private sector individuals, they shrug the department off as a, defunct facility, which is really wrong, because as we can see in days gone by, the director of agriculture was often knighted, had a title. So it was given such importance. It was somebody or the other, right, who was the director of agriculture. And the team of people he had were really strong. And we have seen scientists who have dedicated their lives in the past in the department. So why not use them and not let this tool that we have die down, and we have to then start from scratch. So we have to rethink. Of course, the private sector has to come in, but they can't do it alone. There are research institutes. There's the tea research, rubber research, coconut research, ITI, all these organizations which really should play a major role along with the universities.
Dr. Shanti, thank you very much. So while there, if I'm to understand this correctly, while there may be a specific role or specific application for cold chain, it isn't really a panacea that the people think it is. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of solution. And,
No.
and I think with all meaningful solutions, it has to be carefully designed around the environment and the products that we're trying to get.
Yes. One thing I would like to mention, Niro, is that it's very important for exports. Now, if you're thinking of sea shipment, which we should be thinking of, so far all our produce that we export, and the fruit and vegetable, the little that we export, has been through air freighting. And this is very costly, extremely costly, right? Whereas if you send it by sea, it's going to be, say, 1/4 the cost. But technology and effort have to be put into this. So there is technology available, protocols have been developed, nobody wants to do it. They can't get together the volume that is required to fill a 40-foot reefer. So you need, say, 20 tons of produce. And it's difficult to get that. So maybe 20, 15 years ago when the Mahavali was on, there was Mac Multiples wanting 3 containers of bananas, Amul bananas, because they thought they was really good compared to the tasteless Cavendish at that time that was available in European markets. Our Amul was so good, but we couldn't get together 1 container a month. But today in Amilipitia we have enough bananas to do it. But have we got our act together? No. And we still are talking about air freighting, lobbying for this and lobbying for that, when we have something sitting there which we can handle.
Dr. Shanti, thank you. Bandula, I'm going to turn my attention to you. Cold chain is, Dr. Shanti mentioned how important it is if we're looking at export markets and looking at that being the objective. But is Sri Lanka self-sufficient? Do we have the food security that we need? Or is there a looming food crisis that people seem to be concerned about?
Yeah, let me start like this. Before think about, export, if you can curtail the imports first, so we will land somewhere, because currently we import vegetables, we import fruits and cereals. I'll explain further and latter part of my thing. And out of the total requirement of the cereal, including rice, I think 40 to 50% is import, and the vegetable 10 to 15%. And if you can curtail this, so how much of foreign exchange that you are going to save? And now we are discussing the after COVID impact to the economy. Probably, there will be a situation where a lot of people, they will lose their employment in the hotel industries, various kind of industry. And also, we will lose revenue coming from the foreign employment and various kind of other, whatever exports, tourism, we will lose a lot of foreign exchange. If you can curtail 50% of what we export, like cereals, we'll say the maize, corn. So we can cultivate the 40,000 of acres by curtailing 100,000 metric tons of corn importing from other countries. And direct and indirect employment could be provided, at least I would say 20,000 to 25,000. Because we are experiencing this as a company. We started our serial project way back in 2015, and we started our commercial production 2016, and we have a farmer base of 2,000 odd people, and we already cultivate more than 2,500 acres, and thereby we could provide direct and indirect employment of nearly 2,500, 3,000. By doing that, you can, create employment opportunities, get a lot of, foreign exchange, and I mean rather foreign exchange going to other countries. And if you have a planned cultivation system in Sri Lanka, even vegetable, you can export. The problem is we don't have. Now, for an example, if you take, we'll say, again, the tomato cultivators, number of cultivators and number of acres that they have cultivated. Are they really getting yield per hectare or yield per acre? No. Because they do the cultivation on their own. They just have a land, they go and do the cultivation, they buy the seed from somewhere, and they just do the cultivation. So then agriculture department, the government, other research institute should, now if you take the traditional plantation sector, the tea research institute, rubber research institute, coconut research institute, there are so many institutes, and that is set for years, and so many people, they have set the plan. But when it comes to the rice, yes, there are research institute, and other corn, soya, very attention is very poor. If you have a mechanism to increase the yield, the productivity, so easily, not all the crops, certain crops, we have an opportunity to export. To do that, you have to educate farmers. Now, if you take, we know some farmers. This is 2016. When we go and ask how many acres you are cultivating, they say, okay, sir, we are cultivating 10 acres of corn. Then we ask, what is the crop that you get end of the day? Minimum of 2,000 kilos, 2 metric ton, they should get from an acre. So when we calculate the crop, most of these people, they are getting end of the day 800 to 900, maximum 1,000 kilos from their corn, 1 acre of corn. So no one is there to educate these people, because they have spent fertilizer for 1 acre, they have spent seeds for 1 acre, they have spent water for 1 acre, they have spent various labor, you name it, all those things, inputs for 1 acre. End of the day, they are getting 50% of the expected crop. So this has to be addressed. It's not that difficult. Easily you can do it, because with the experience I just want to share my experience. It's easy to do. Only we need some committed people to do this. So that's my conclusion on this. We can have certain products here. If you can do the cultivation in a planned manner, still we have an opportunity to export.
Thank you, Bandula. Bandula mentioned that we need to move away from being import dependent. Bhati, I think we all agree that being import dependent is probably the biggest risk. When it comes to relying on global supply chains and global infrastructure for food security. What do you think are the major risks for countries like us, which are sort of food import dependent?
Yeah, Niro, I will talk about an industry that I am in, and bit of a controversial subject in these days, palm oil. Why I'm taking this, right now, the government has stopped all imports of palm oil. And if you really continue like this, Sri Lanka is going to be short of uh, oil and fat. Maximum another 3 months' time, we'll have a severe shortage. Because the production of now everyone say to plant coconut and get coconut oil into this, but there are a lot of problem why we can't go into coconut, because the coconut cannot be grown everywhere, and you don't get the real production now. As someone said, another problem that we don't get the correct uh, the productivity from a land area. That's one of the major problems in Sri Lanka. That's another area that we should address by the authorities. So going back into the subject, what I said, in oil yields, palm oil gives 3.75 to 4 metric tons per hectare. There's no any other oil compared to palm oil which comes even close to that. Soya oil 0.35, coconut oil 1 ton, canola or sunflower comes to about 0.48. Likewise, so you required 8 to get a quantum of oil what is required to get the same extent in palm oil. Now, if I take coconut, Sri Lanka has an edible oil requirement about 90,000 metric tons. But we produce basically half of that. So balance half, we are spending about 12.5 billion to get oil into Sri Lanka. The previous governments, when the current prime minister was the president of the country, he approved 20,000 hectares of palm oil to be cultivated in Sri Lanka. Right now, we have cultivated something like 11,000 hectares. But the resistance that we have, you would have seen on the TVs, on the papers, for this crop. With some authority, I can say, because I'm a person who have planted and harvested as a planter, and I know what are the repercussions and the good side of this. So I'm not going to talk very much on the subject to say palm oil is good, because people will think that I am biased because I am running a company that produces palm oil. But I will give little bit of information. Now, our neighbors like Malaysia and Indonesia, they have extents of now has 32.9 million hectares in total, and they are cultivating 6.14 million hectares. They have palm oil. Now we are talking about 20,000. So that is about 18.6% of their total extent is under palm oil. If you take Indonesia, they have 191 million hectares. Out of that, 12 million hectares they have put palm oil. That is 6.3 million. Now, Sri Lanka, we have 6.56 million hectares in total, and we are talking about 20,000 hectares, which is less than 1% of the extent that we are talking. To fulfill the shortage of 40,000 metric tons of oil, if coconut has to be planted, they have to plant about 40 to 50,000 hectares. Whereas palm oil is planted, you required only 10,000 hectares to get this quantum. The authorities, the coconut research and relevant authorities have scientifically studied that the requirement of palm oil or the oil requirement in Sri Lanka, because they don't have adequate quantum of coconut in Sri Lanka, because we are a country, we eat out of 2,700 million nuts produced, 1,700 nuts are eaten by the Sri Lankans as malupol. You all know we love our polsamba. So huge quantity goes for consumption. They have very little to go for oil production. So this is the most lucrative and less land consuming product. Lot of myths are there. I can talk hours and hours, to give information, but I will not take very much time. This crop, actually, it's not a devil. It's a crop that grows, and the myth is that it takes huge amount of water and dries up the areas. Now, Sri Lanka, we have about 3,500 millimeters rainfall per annum. Oil palm will require only 1,500 to 1,750. Majority of water is, we all know, it goes unutilized into the sea. So if authorities do a real scientific study on this and take appropriate action, I think Sri Lanka can be self-sufficient in their oil production.
Bhatia, palm oil is a highly contentious crop. Monoculture is a highly contentious methodology. But it's not for me to decide what is right or wrong. It is, ultimately the authorities, the people that have to decide. We can only shed light on opportunities and issues that arise. Dr. Shanti, would you mind sharing your views on the statements made by Bhatia?
Yes. I must say that I'm also rather ignorant about the production of palm oil, although I have visited some factories in Malaysia and so on. I think there is a place for it. And after all, if it's a matter of 20,000 hectares, we can. But what I'm afraid is that we already have opened up lots of land. We don't need to open up any new lands. We need to optimize the agricultural lands that are already available. Now, the Mahaveli Authority, during the time of the Mahaveli scheme, opened up 90,000 hectares, right? At great cost, ecological, financial, many things. But today we see some benefit from them. The only thing is they fragmented the land, and that's a huge problem. So our former economy was based on plantations. Now, why did the British people do that? They made money out of it. So the economies of scale are very, very important. And this romantic view of small is beautiful just doesn't work anymore. Unfortunately, it is our culture, and that we do have this system of small farming. But let's look at it from a positive angle. It's a good thing, if we can work together and be sensible about it, for which we need education. And I'm glad Bandula brought out the fact of health and education, because it's so much a part of agriculture. These three things should be given national priority at this point. If we are planning policies for the future, agriculture, health, and education are of primary importance. And we do have a certain amount of education, but we are sitting on the laurels of literacy for long enough. That's simply not what we need. We need good tertiary education. Secondary, we have up to a point, but we are now talking about that step beyond. And today, in today's context, when we have access to electronic media, our universities must open up. We must have international interaction. Okay, science is not science is international. We need to exchange information. Our young people need to open their eyes. They can't live in a little world of their own. And we should get rid of this island mentality that we know everything and we are the best in everything. We are not. We are just a little tiny island with beautiful, wonderful resources, which we need to use very carefully. So I think that when you come to the palm oil, it's a good idea to start looking at import substitution there. And as for the fruits, if we organize production, we will have plenty of fruits, right? But today it is cheaper to buy an apple or an orange than it is to buy a mango or a pineapple or a papaya for that matter. Bananas. So, it's all to do with the economies of scale. And if we don't put that in place and we don't think and address the problem, we are going to be in great trouble. So previously, we have been basing our foreign exchange earnings on a very wobbly platform of components such as foreign exchange remittances. I mean, what kind of ethics is that? or on tourism. Okay, tourism. We want high-end tourism. Can we achieve that in today's context? Look at what's happening. So we need to think, okay, we have invested a lot of money in tourism. How can we use this? Maybe channel it towards health, geriatric care, elders' homes, where we have good weather, good climate, people who can be educated medically to work in these facilities, right? And we can earn money that way. Employment, Bandula brought that up also. We need to employ our people, all these people who are in the hotel industry. So either they have to move into agriculture, but they can also go into the health sector. We, at the moment, in the universities are producing very good graduates and exporting them free of charge, taxpayer money, right? They don't want to work here because they don't see the benefit that they would expect from their years of education. So these things it's complex. You can't look at anything in isolation, but I would like to take this opportunity to bring those points in as well, because we want agriculture to move. It has to happen. We have to base our revolution on agriculture in this country. I firmly believe that we have to get our resources in place and the people to take it forward. So if we don't invest in education and science, a country cannot develop. And this is a very, very sad situation because research institutes are considered ivory towers. They are not. It is the tea research, rubber research, coconut research, ITI that have, and the MRI, institutions like that, Institute of Fundamental Studies, Standards Institute, these people play a big role, but they're totally neglected. They need to be linked with universities. University students should be channeled into these institutes to work there, to realize that there is a future for them. Right? So it's very important that we think properly and not just follow and float and hope for the best, which I feel is what has happened with our, policies. I have heard very senior economists saying to me, get rid of coconut lands. If it's for housing, let it go. This is the demand and supply. But I mean, we need food, right? So if coconut is such an important crop, look at it and see how you can improve production. If you fragment coconut estates, they are not going to be viable. So you need to be able to plan your economy. And I would like to also point out that there should be new industries, high-end technology industries that we should bring in. We have universities in this country, we have scientists, right? But for instance, cytokinin extraction from coconut water. Have we looked at that? I think it's about $5,000 for an ounce or something, phenomenal. So we have heaps of palmyra trees all over the North Batikalo, just standing there. Have we looked at what we can do with that? Palmyra is a palm and it has the same endosperm, it has water, palmyra water toddy. So we should look and see whether we can look at high-end chemicals that can be extracted for export and look at earnings that way. I know that tea liquors, I have a friend who's done lovely work on that and he has opened up markets. He's not the only one, but concentrated tea liquor, right? So there are other industries that we have to take forward and not sit on old platforms. We need to think afresh and this is the time to do so.
Dr. Shanti, thank you very much. And I'd like to talk more about introducing technology into agricultural processes in a moment. But before we do that, Bandula, before looking at new crops or introducing new crops into our mix like palm oil, do you think that we must first optimize the existing or indigenous crops that we already have and improve the supply chain of those? I do understand the importance of import substitution, and Bhatia mentioned that coconut oil is only able to cater to a part of our current demand. Have you seen a shift in the crop mix? Do you see a change demand post-COVID? Do you anticipate that to change further?
Let me start like this. Now, Bhatia was talking about the palm oil. Our industry is using palm oil generally, and that's true. That's a fact. And a lot of R&D has to go into the coconut oil. Now, if you take the total land area in Sri Lanka, we take the families, number of families in Sri Lanka. We have over 5 million families in Sri Lanka. Leave aside the Colombo, Western Province, all other areas where the density is 3,000 not, and if you go to the Anuradhapura and all other districts, it's less than 100. Now, this coconut plantation, we should not think, we should not think about the plantation concept. I mean, if you are going to do the coconut planting. So each and every family in those areas, Anuradhapura, Polonnaru, now people have a meat. Now we did a CSR in Batiklo, Valioya, that area. We provided free of charge coconut trees to those areas. Last couple of months ago, we visited and people are harvesting the coconut. So we can provide, 2 to 3 coconut plants for those families and let them to grow. Suppose if we end up with 50% success rate, so we will have a kind of our local requirement. So balance we can use for the industries. Only we have to have kind of a R&D input, because palm oil, of course, yes, we have to use. But if we have some kind of R&D, so why not? And we will be able to use coconut oil for our industries. You take the Israel. Sri Lanka is bigger than, Sri Lanka is 206 or 210% bigger than Israel. I think they have 1 or 2 lakes. They are exporting vegetables and the fruits to all these rich countries. Whereas our position, because people have a meat, when we, if you are importing from Pakistan or India, per kilo price, when it's landed to the Colombo, if you take the green gram. Now, green gram, before government took a decision to ban the import. Before that, the price per kilo is 175 to 200 rupees. No sooner they stopped the imports, the prices went up to 250, 240. Now we have to buy at that price. Yes, we know our COP is going up. But still, if you utilize unattended, uncultivated land in Sri Lanka, gradually these prices will come down. It is applied to the corn, because corn and the soya, they were importing. And when we start cultivating, yes, its price depends on the import price, and the local farmer, of course, look at the import price and they place the price accordingly. But gradually those prices come down, because farmer knows that they have a fixed price. So their end of the day, their crop is, we purchase the crop, that is guaranteed. Likewise, now if you take Anuradhapura district, we have about 225,000 families. Out of that, we say if you can motivate to cultivate coconut, we say 100. If you can motivate 100,000 families to plant coconut, at least 2 plants, you get 200,000 coconut plant. After 5 years, we will get the harvest. One might think, of course, these are all mathematics. No, we have done these things. It's not that difficult to do that. Therefore, as Dr. mentioned, first of all, we must maximize our productivity on whatever available our crops. Then we should think about the whatever import. But I know when it comes to the palm oil, yes, we have to have a kind of a balanced approach on that issue. Other than that, the lakes, I just mentioned the Israel, they have 1 or 2 lakes. In Sri Lanka, according to the irrigation, is the 30,000 odd lakes. I don't know how many, and probably they may be utilizing 10,000 lakes. So we can, do the kind of a desilting process. We can start and get more capacity. And I just want to, I got a video clip yesterday, before yesterday, all this upcountry, situation after the heavy rain. How much of water just going to the sea unattended? If you see all these rivers, you can see. I can't understand. You do not need, rocket science, this kind of thing too. I mean, manage this water, because our upcountry is anyway by nature is up, the water coming down. So it's a kind of a mechanism to retain this water, convert into the dry zone. Because dry zone, if you have now dry zone, if you are doing the cultivation, only issue is the water. Otherwise, you can predict the crop yield and everything, provided that all these authorities go into the farmers and educate them on the yield and water management, fertilizer management, chemical management. These things has to be happening. Therefore, I strongly believe we have to first maximize our country productivity. We have to educate farmers. Private sector has to go into the farming, and then think about the import or the export. So that's my basically my understanding.
Thank you, Bandula. Dr. Shanti, I'm going to ask you this question. And before I do, I'd like to remind all of the attendees that if they'd like to ask a question, there's a question and answer function in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Please click the Q&A function and feel free to ask any of the panelists any questions. I will read your name out unless you wish to remain anonymous. My next question is really about fertilizer. At this time, Sri Lankan farmers are in despair because there seems to be a fertilizer shortage. And authorities are saying that they're importing, fertilizer. And we've been talking about food security a little bit. So I wanted to understand, how important. How critical is this imported fertilizer? And if we are dependent on imported fertilizer, then does Sri Lanka really have food security? So that question is for Shanti, but please, other panelists, I will be turning to you as well.
I'm not sure whether I'm an authority in this area, but certainly from a common sense point of view, we do need imported fertilizer. There's no question about that. We don't produce enough in the country. Doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't look into it. Composting is something that is traditionally done, and we need to encourage our farmers to do that. And then that would help. But fertilizers are important. We can't do away with it. So per se, saying you don't want fertilizers is a misnomer. You just do need it. So you need to invest in that. That's an investment, right, in any business. So you can't say that you don't need it. Okay, we are to some extent dependent on that, but then we are dependent on other things as well. Medical supplies, this, that, and the other, so many other things, right? We can't produce everything. But it depends on how we channel our finances to make something affordable and useful for the country. And this is where I bring in GAP again. I can never stop saying enough about GAP, because if we practice it, we are using it sensibly and in a way which is affordable for everybody, the consumer, the farmer, and everybody else. So that is really very, very important. I think we haven't also touched about in the area of e-commerce. Now that's also something we should look at. Agri-banking, e-banking and other demographics of gathering information, which can be used in the marketplace, because we said the marketplace is weak. So going back to that agenda, I think, trading and electronic media, which now is manageable on telephones, a lot of it. So a lot of our farmers are using telephones, and telephones are being used for extension. Our extension service doesn't exist. The Department of Agriculture doesn't have a proper extension service. Although I am told that there are 33,000 people being paid salaries as extension workers, these people are not actually doing extension work. So we need to think about using modern technology in the electronic side as well in agriculture and marketing in that area. Also, I think we haven't touched on dairy. That's another neglected area that we should look at, and it's very much part of agriculture. Why should we, again, import substitution? Why are we dependent on powdered milk, for goodness sake? when we have cows, we have buffaloes, and we're just not getting down to handling this. So the private sector has an opportunity, and investment has to be made, and there should be policy decisions also put forward, which will encourage people to go into dairy production.
Okay, Dr. Shanti, Bandula, I'll be asking you about milk, but first I'd like to hear Bhatya's thoughts on the fertilizer, imported fertilizer, looking for local alternatives as well.
Yes, Niro, I too agree with Doctor. Now, it's very important that we add carbon matter to the soil. Even to add artificial fertilizer, you should have a sufficient carbon content in your soils. If not, applying fertilizer into a dead soil is no use. So, saying that, artificial fertilizer is very important. We should look after our soils by adding more carbon into the soils. Why I say it's available, important, we all do business. Every farmer is doing a business. End of the day, he wanted to make a profit because no one is doing any cultivation for charity. And there's a cost for everything. And take, plantation industry to produce a kilo of tea or rubber or kilo of palm oil, there's a cost. If you don't get the productivity right, if you don't get the correct production per hectare right, you can't make a profit. You will give up that business and try to go somewhere else. Actually, that is what happened to rubber right now. Rubber prices are very low. Not even the plantation companies, even the smallholders have given up because they can't sustain. So, and also to add to what I said earlier, we are not opening a single new land. These are all unproductive rubber and unproductive tea lands in the low country wet zone going into palm oil. And any crop, if you plant, without good agricultural practice, it's a disaster. Any crop for that matter. So even palm oil or rubber or tea has to be followed with all these good agricultural if we are to be sustained. So getting back to fertilizer, yes, in plantation sector, it's a paramount important thing to have our fertilizer. Otherwise, we can't get our production. Sri Lanka has the best tea in the world. Demand is such, thanks to COVID, the demand for tea has gone up. And I don't know how far it's correct. A friend of mine was telling me today, not a single COVID patient was found in the tea plantation because they drink a lot of black tea. Our plantation workers live on black tea and they have this inbuilt immunity in their system. Subject to correction. These are the thoughts. And also, this has been scientifically found, tea gives immunity, increase the immunity. So thereby the demand for Sri Lankan teas have gone up since COVID-19. So we have to be alive when, India went out of production, Kenya went out of production. So there's an opportunity that we have derived right now. So we have to gear, to supply that vacuum and, make some money for Sri Lanka. So in that context, yes, fertilizer is paramount important.
Bhatia, before I ask Mandula his question, I know also that you're not a fertilizer expert, but has the industry explored local alternatives? For example, Eppavala, or any other indigenous resources that we have to produce the required.
Yes, I think we are the largest the use of Eppavala apatite. It comes in the form of phosphates, and we used Eppavala phosphate, nothing else. We don't use phosphate any other form unless otherwise it's a specific crop where you require super phosphates or something which has to be brought in from out. Otherwise, 99% of phosphates we are buying from Eppavala, and it's going into our plantation. So we are sourcing our local whatever it's available. That's what I said. Even compost we are sourcing all cow dung, then poultry refuse, all that have been collected and converted into compost, and it's going on to plantations. And also to say that plantation, we have all these research institute in Sri Lanka: tea research, rubber research, coconut research. Our fertilizer programs are based with the scientific background. We don't just go and apply arbitrarily. There's a systemic way of doing it. If I talk about rubber, the rubber once in 3 years, the institute comes and check our soil and folio and give their recommendation. What is required only will be replaced into the soil. We just don't put blanketly. Even for tea, every week we take tea leaves out. That means certain percentage nitrogen it's going out of the from the plant. So we replace nitrogen. There's a formula that we calculate, and we calculate what we are taking out, and that's been replaced. So there's no arbitrary use of excess fertilizer. It's very carefully used because it's money. End of the day, we all work for rupees and cents, and the bottom line is very important. So we are very careful in using fertilizer too.
Thank you, Bhatia. Bandula, I'd like to talk with you a little bit about the dairy industry, the current picture, and what do you think the future looks like?
Yeah, since we are in the powder milk industry, although we are in the powder milk industry and we important do the distribution, we being a local company, we promote liquid. Currently, I would say about 30 to 35% of the requirement is available in Sri Lanka. What, as a company, as a person, what we believe is still that we can have a system, and we can have, we can go up to, I would say about, we can exceed 60 to 70% of our requirement if we have a plan. Again, because we are studying the land areas, number of families. So if you our farmers, they basically don't depend on one crop. If they cultivate corn, if they cultivate chilies, if they cultivate watermelon, if they cultivate, you name it, for a season, Yala and Maha, they cultivate 2 to 3 crops. In addition to that, they have cow source. Therefore, the best thing is, because we were highly talking about the yield per cow. If farmer gets about 8 to 10 liters per day, so he's getting a lot of money. As a government, they can have a kind of a mechanism, system to motivate these farmers to have cows. Probably like India, where we have to provide everything in free. First year, second year, third year. So whatever benefits free of charge you have to provide for the farmers. So we can go up to, I would say about 60 to 70% of our requirement can be met locally. But when we are discussing it, what happens is people come out with the negative fact. In fact, we being in a powder milk industry, there's no any other option for us to. We are promoting liquid. We are promoting because we have a CSR program called Abedane, where we get all these cows going to the slaughterhouses, most of the cows, and give service to the farmers. So we promote it, and there's a concept that Sri Lanka being a Buddhist country, majority of the Buddhist, and they don't want to kill the cows basically after getting the milk. We don't think there are so many options. Those cows, we can make use of, creating fertilizer. We have coconut estates, we have a lot of marshlands, we have other areas, so that we can get them and, feed them and get the coconut, as rather cow dung, put into the coconut or whatever, and vegetable, make compost. These things, we don't think about them. We are going to the Japan, America being technologically most developed countries. When you go into those countries and they are remote areas, 100% they are depending on the agriculture. Chicago, we think is Chicago is the kind of a well developed, yes, but when you go few kilometers out of the Chicago, so it's totally agriculture and basic farmers are there. Therefore, what we propose is, rather than pointing out the negatives or difficulties, if we start something, at least we can hit the 50% of at least 50% of our liquid milk requirement in Sri Lanka. I have my doubt. This is my personal view, going for 100%. I would say about 50 to 60% easily we can go. We can meet that requirement.
Thank you, Badura. Dr. Shanti, do you have anything that you'd like to add on the dairy industry in Sri Lanka?
Well, I think that it's something that we have to invest in, and that we have the veterinary department at the University of Peradeniya, and they've done a lot of good work in the livestock development area. So we need to really, I think the policies have to be looked at and applied. They're also very good at developing policies, but implementing them is another thing. So how are we going to do this? We all realize that we want fresh milk in the market. We want our children to have fresh milk. And if we are doing powdered milk, it should be local milk that's made into powder for specific purposes. So I think that the dairy industry has a lot of potential, and it's something that has been neglected. So I think we really need to look at it very seriously. And also, from a value addition point of view for fruits and vegetables, I'd just like to mention that we need to look at new areas. I know traditionally we've been looking at sauces, jams, pickles, chutneys, now dehydrated fruits for export. But what I would like to point out is that if you're doing a processed product, you have to have the right variety. You can't just say, I have too many tomatoes this year, the glut can go into processing. No, it has to be targeted. So you have to be market oriented in every business opportunity that you may think of. If you're going to, your resource base has to be focused on a market. That's something I'd like to leave with everybody.
I mean, I've got a number of audience questions here, and a few of them are focused on how we can, or how the farmers can be more aware of the market demands. And the first question, which is open to all panelists, so please feel free to answer it. How and where can technology be used to support the farmer in optimizing results for farming, short-term and long-term? Is crowdsourcing available in farming? That's the question. So, I think Bharti is stepping forward to answer that.
Yeah, Nero, I'll try to answer the way that I could. In the plantation sector, of course, the technology we are bringing in rapidly because we have a severe shortage of workforce. As you know, plantation, the auto-migration of worker to Colombo is very high. So we are settled with a limited number of workers. So without the technology, we can't exist. So in the plantation sector, it has come very rapidly, and we are onto technology at a very rapid rate. The question says that, how to get it, that's one of the sad areas, I would say, in Sri Lanka, unless otherwise someone go and, inquire the things available from the agricultural department, even in the rural areas. Very little that happens, the department goes and give the knowledge down to the farmers. What I heard, I'm just talking, correct if I'm wrong. That part, I think it's missing. I think Dr. Shanti also, touched on that. The agricultural department has to step up, a little more, and to get this technology going down the line to the farmers. Because we, as very correctly said, we are not short. What we have to do is we have to minimize from a unit land area, get the maximum, use the best technology. Now, you go to any other country in glass houses, they get triple the crop what you are getting on the land. They don't have sunlight. They don't have anything. Everything is, artificially fed, and they increase their production. Why can't we do it? So there's a question mark, who should do it. I think Dr. Shanti will handle that. Crowdsourcing, yes, I would say a practical example that's happening, with the COVID-19, the youths who are working in Colombo all came back to the estates. Supermarkets and various places, majority of the estate youths are working in Colombo. So all are back on the plantation. You can't just keep idling, the youth. What we did was, with the help of the ministry and with the government request at the beginning, we started opening up the lands that we have identified for this year cultivation. We just postponed for 6 months and got these people to come and cultivate in those lands. We said we don't want anything. We supply them the seed material, got these people to cultivate, and we told them everything what is coming out is theirs. So in our community, in the plantation community, we have done that. So it's an answer for that question.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, with agriculture being so closely connected to the environment and climate change being its largest threat, what sustainable farming practices are being implemented today? Open question.
Okay, in the plantation sector, as we all know, sustainability is the word right now, because as I told you earlier, what are the resources that we have to optimize it. So what we do, we try to preserve all the reserve. On our plantation, we are harvesting rainwater. It's in big way. At least, to source it during the dry spell, the rainwater is harvested. We have opened up in upcountry, although Bandu said upcountry it's coming down. No, we have made lakes in upcountry on the plantation and preserving the precious water. And also, the technology has gone. We are harvesting solar power. All our factories have gone with solar, and we are harvesting solar. So likewise, we have done the way that we could within the plantation. Dr. Shanti will tell about the country. In plantation, yes, we are doing it, and we are very much on to sustainable agriculture. Otherwise, we will not go anywhere. And in time to come, because our produce are sold overseas, people will not buy. There are a lot of requirements that comes now. We have got so much of certifications, spending a lot of money to prove that we are adhering to good agricultural practices. So that will become a must in time to come if we are to sell our produce overseas. So we are on it.
Any other panelists would like to contribute to that question?
And this sustainable agriculture, other than the traditional plantation, tea, rubber, coconut, take the vegetable or other crops, the main requirement is the water. Now, dry zone, so you can predict the rain. You can, out of 12 months, 7 to 8 months, you don't get the rain. But there are plenty of lakes. So it is managing water. So it's not a huge task. Easily can be done because we have done as a company, and it can be done. You do not need to spend a lot of money also. So if you manage water, because when we go to the particular site, value site, where people are asking, they don't ask donations. People say, sir, some or other, get us some water. Their main requirement is water. If authorities, government, private sector, everyone can provide water, so easily we can have a sustainable agriculture on those areas because soil is very rich. The soil is very rich. The yield, of course, Agrarian Service Department or Agriculture Department has to intervene with their agriculture officers and educate farmers how to do the coconut planting or banana, whatever it is. And soil is very rich. No need to add a lot of artificial fertilizer. Initial stage, if you manage for another 15 to 20 years, no need to add a lot of artificial fertilizer because that soil is that rich. Only issue is the water. If you can provide water, it's done. Still, this waterfalls, when I see the waterfalls from the upcountry, the water that we are wasting, just passing through the country to sea. So, very sad situation. Other corner of now we are in the both corners. we are in Mondragala. As a company, we are in Anuradhapura Polan now. Both corners are suffering without water. Here, we are suffering because of water, floods and all kind of disaster. So I don't know. I mean, this can be managed for the benefit of the farmers.
Thank you. Dr. Shah.
Yeah, what I would like to say is that we do have a tradition of village tanks. And I think that's got to be revived. I mean, it's happening to some extent, more in some places, less in others, where the effort to keep the tanks functional, dredging them, cleaning them, that was the culture. But somewhere along the line, people have forgotten about this, and lots of these tanks are not catching the water, harvesting the water that they could do. And I think, as Bandula rightly said, it's very good to see that in organized farming, in the plantation farms, this is happening very well. Why? Because they have the resources, they have the education, they have the land mass, labor less so, as Bhatia was saying, but it's still there, right? So now here, with the small farmer, this is why it's so important. What are the strategies that we have to take? It's very easy to say climate change and, bandy these slogans, but what is the practicality? What do we address? The fundamental problems of economies of scale. And one thing the department has done, thank goodness they're in it, is good agricultural practice. For goodness sake, we have to have it tomorrow. We need that for this country. And we need to invest in it. There is no question. Traceability is fundamental to any agricultural product and development of agriculture in this country. Traceability, right? Even for tourism. If you're thinking about tourism as it was, or the future, where you're looking at other opportunities, medical tourism, geriatric tourism, elders' homes, whatever it is, traceability. So those steps have begun. Now we need to accelerate, get them in place. And that's going to take a lot of effort. We need extension workers for that. So what are we going to do? What are these 33,000 people being paid for, right? Are we going to stick with them? Some major shift has to happen. There is the electronic media. We have touched upon that before, not only for e-commerce, which is very important, market information, all that has to take place with handheld devices and information that is available. They are not expensive now. People can afford them. So there are programs that have started. I know that Dialogue, for instance, I was involved with my project at ITI, where we, together with the Department of Agriculture, scientists need to work together. We put together post-harvest information. The department gave us information on production for mangoes, papaya, banana, and they do it for rice. And they tell the farmer for 1 rupee, you can be a member, so 1 rupee a month or what a call or whatever it is, very low amount of money, small amount of money, they get the information. So these channels have to be used to get the message across. And the Department of Agriculture, okay, think laterally. You don't have the people, what do we do? Can we develop methods? Can we reach the farmers electronically, have audiovisual classes? Education is very important, and we need to get more people into universities so that we get farmers who are educated and can make informed decisions and not depend on what's passing them by and what is handed down to them. They need to make their own decisions with background knowledge.
Understood. My final question is...
If that, can I add something to Doctor's comment?
So certainly, please go ahead.
You take, for an example, TJC, Ella Farm. 10 years back or 15 years back, we were enjoying traditional mango. And the price of the 1 kilo is 150 to 200 rupees maximum. Now today, the TJC mango, they have, high demand. The kilo price is double of the traditional mango. And farmers, they have started cultivating TJC mango. That's the kind of, approach we have to have. Every time we say, okay, we don't have enough land, we don't have enough technology, we don't have water, our attitudes are, such. It's not the case. We met farmers in Anuradhapura, Volonnaruwa, Betiklo, that area. They are children. They are coming with the new technology, not like the father. So getting maximum benefit out of this farm. The TJs is the classic example. They basically changed the total mango plantation system. We also went into that. If you have 10 plants, if you manage it properly, that's enough for a family, because out of 12 months, if not mistaken, 8 to 9 months you can get the harvest. We are thinking, okay, so these are the crops that we should go. This is what we can do maximum. So we have to have a kind of a shift, and the government also should look into those industries, how they are performing. And this Elavala farm, I have visited that farm. It's far away from Anuradhapura also. They are doing very well. So this is the example that I want to highlight, to get people to motivate. Even the companies, not only the mango, other crops also they can develop and have a kind of a change to those industries. Thank you.
Yes, talking about Elavala horticulture, I would also like to say that we have worked closely with them. And what I find is they're one of the few companies that really appreciate the work that is done by scientists, and they work very closely with, not only with us, with the Department of Agriculture, extension services. Then they also have set up their own extension work, and the private sector sometimes dismisses the government sector, the public sector, saying we can't work with them. But how have Elavala done it? They have succeeded, and they have worked very closely, and not in any underhand way, by trying to bribe people or anything like that. Everything above board done very nicely, and it has been a pleasure to work with them. And I'm proud to say that we have people like that in our country.
Dr. Shanti, thank you very much. Bandula and Bhatia, thank you very much for joining us. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so the audience who have asked questions that haven't been asked, I'm terribly sorry. However, you can continue to ask questions on the Facebook page and the YouTube page of Newsfirst, where the videos will be published, and perhaps the panelists will be kind enough to answer those questions on there. I hope that policymakers within the government, leaders from the private sector, and individuals watching this have had their thoughts provoked. And I hope that they will perhaps explore new opportunities, or perhaps the same opportunities in a new way. Bandula Pereira, COO, Milk and Agri, and Group General Manager of Malaban Biscuits. Bhatia Bulumulla, Director, CEO of LPDA Plantations. Dr. Shanti Wilson, Independent Consultant on Sustainable Fresh Produce and Supply Chains. Thank you very, very much. And thank you very much to Chandra Jayaratna, who has been rapporteur and patiently listening to this entire discussion and preparing a document to support it thereafter. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the Newsfirst team for supporting and enabling this panel discussion and hosting it live. Thank you all very much, and good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.